My next guests are both technical leaders inside of startups built on, around, and for open source. Please give a huge round of applause to Benoit and Laetitia. Okay, so here's where I want to start this. So we talked a little bit about what's good, bad, and ugly inside of open source. I'm sure you guys have a few comments and thoughts on that, but here's where I want to start, which is you guys are engineering leaders inside of companies operating around an open source project. How do you see the role of an engineering leader in an organization like that as being different or the same as your counterparts in Malt or BlaBlaCar or some of the other companies we're going to see today?
Maybe my experience is different because I'm working for an open source community that is not backed up by a company. And that's very different because there is no pressure to get a feature out. If it's not ready, it won't be out. And we wait for it to be ready. For example, we had this very important feature, merge in SQL, which can do an upsert and an insert to merge all the results into one table. And we wanted to have it out for Postgres 14. We found out there was a problem. And it was not ready for Postgres 14. It will be ready for Postgres 15 now. But we just decided to take the feature out. There was no pressure, no commercial pressure, because everything we do is free. We work pro bono, so we can decide that it's not ready, it won't hit production. That's very difficult to do in a company.
It's very different because I got a lot of pressure to get features out on my side, obviously. I would say that in a traditional engineering role, you have the different stakeholders, you have the business part, you have the product part, obviously. But when you are in an open source company, you have as well the community as stakeholders. So you have to take care of the community, you have to define your choice based on what the community is expecting. So if you decide to change the strong technical part of your system, it cannot work if the community is not involved in the choice. So you have to discuss as well with the community about the different choice that you take.
And that's a really good point. Maybe if we back up for a second, Laetitia, when we were talking a little bit about the different relationship that you guys have to open source, clearly Postgres is bigger than one company. And yes. that really drives how the company operates, almost by design.
Yeah, well, the Postgres community has structured itself in the beginning of year 2000 to prevent any company to take over the community. So it won't happen. Postgres is there to last and will last as long as human beings are interested in transactional databases. So that's very important. And the other thing is you won't be able to push any feature or patch into Postgres until everyone agrees that's good for Postgres. So if only one people objects, you have to work around to make it better or to address or argue about how the comment was not a good thing and so on until everyone agrees. And when I say everyone, even you can go to the Postgres mailing list and object on any feature if you want. You better have good arguments, but you can do that. Anyone in the world can go on the mailing list and give their opinion, and it will be taken into account. And when you have 7 billion humans to agree with, that's difficult.
And that's got to be a little different for you, Benoit. I mean, you've got a community edition and an enterprise edition for Akeneo, and you've got a community base that is providing input, but you've also got a customer base, and you have a bit more kind of control over deciding when you build something, what do you choose to build, and are you building it for the community, or are you building it for the enterprise edition? How does that play out?
Yeah, it's a good question. When you decide to build a feature, of course, you do your user research. And in our user research, of course, we are doing our community research at the same time. In fact, what we see is that a lot of customers started with our community edition because it's real product. You can really work with it. But as you're growing, you need some features that that will be available only inside the enterprise edition. Then we need to take care about the future customers as well because they are part of the community. So of course they have an impact on the choice of features, on the different part of how we build the software as well.
And so what does it mean, what do you think fundamentally distinguishes, the engineering roadmap and the way you guys think about solving problems, like versus a traditional organization? Do you feel fundamentally like, open source beyond the mindset of saying we want to build software that's free? Do you think fundamentally it comes down to the same principles? Listen to your customers, deliver what matters most, create consensus, or do you feel like there's something more than just the licensing model on the code base?
I think it's more wide than that. I see it as a gift to humanity. We're building good software because no commercial pressure, so we can wait for the code to be mature enough before it's shipped in production. And then everything we do, we have, as we have to agree with everyone. Of course, it's not the same way to see things, and it's more difficult to push things. But it also comes with very interesting discussions with different point of view. And the Postgres mailing list is one of the rare cases where I've seen adult people being able to change their mind when they hear other people arguing with them and saying, okay, I was wrong, maybe we will try this design instead. And that's wonderful.
On my side, I would say that at the heart of the engineering role, it's about solving problems. Okay, so it boils down to that. And when you provide open source software, it allows you to solve the problem for more people than just your customers, just your paying customers. You provide something to the community so you can solve this problem for a lot of people around the world without yourself knowing about these people. So I think it's really, yes, the whole discipline about solving problems, yes, it's part of the engineering, but the impact is wider than you may do with a traditional company.
And what do you see, I was talking with JB about it earlier, but what do you see companies doing well when they interact with the open source projects that you guys interact with? Like, what do you like to see from customers? Like, what's a good user, a good contributor, or a good customer? Especially if I think about the company user. There's the individual user, and maybe on the community edition, or just someone building, a database on Postgres. But what do you, from the bigger actors, what do you see as a good relationship, and what do you see as maybe unhealthy? Okay.
I have a very good example of both. First, entity. There are a telecom company in Japan. And from years 2000, they were giving back money to Postgres by sponsoring events all over the world. And at one point, the Postgres community asked them, why are you doing that? That's nice, thank you, but why? And they said, you helped us saving so much money because we're not paying Oracle licenses now, so we're giving back half of what we would have paid for Oracle to you. And that's a great way. And also they were hiring people working 100% of the time to develop Postgres. So that's a good way to support open source. And a bad way to support open source, a bad way not to support open source would be, I don't want to point finger, but you know that one of the huge cloud provider in the world kind of use the project without reversing everything to the community, without sponsoring events or only the entry-level sponsor where they have a lot of money, not giving back any features they developed on the side and things like that. That's totally legal and allowed, but morally could be questionable.
I would add as well that a good citizen of an open source community is someone as a company or as an individual that take part of inside the community, that bring his own issues and that is trying to help others as well and is trying to make everything progress in the right direction. And you can do that as an individual, you can do that as a company. For example, on our side, we have all our development processes on GitHub, so you can even see when people are discussing about the pull request and when people don't agree together, about the different solutions. And sometimes we see some company or people stepping inside the discussion and saying, I would say that my preference will go to this direction or this other direction. So, yeah, taking part, being part of the community, really, being active.
Okay. What are you talked a little bit about the challenge of building for open source, namely an opinionated community. What are some of the other challenges that you guys face?
When you write open source code, you know that it will be published worldwide. So it's not the same quality of code you write when you write on a closed source software.
Good documentation.
Yeah, but also the quality of the code. Because obviously, people will look at it. So you have some pressure on that point. But actually, that's good.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think at first, with our first developers, they were pretty shy, to push their code on GitHub, so everybody will see their code. But now it's quite natural, and I think that's an important part. Another issue that we had at first is people didn't trust open source as much as now. Even it was only 10 years ago, we had some customers saying, okay, if you are open source, it means that anybody can contribute to the code and implement a backdoor, and there's a security issue being open source. We had now, it's almost, no, it doesn't happen anymore, but it happened at the beginning of work, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems there's a mental barrier there for some companies to get over. You've got good actors who kind of understand the benefit and are even giving back, and you've got other people who are still wrapping their heads around how to make it work.
Yeah, but I would say that open source now is far better well understood than 10 years ago.
I'd even say, who would not consider Linux as their OS in production?
Yeah.
True. So, one of the things that we were talking about, I was kind of poking at it earlier when I said, is open source just a licensing model? As I mentioned a few weeks ago when we were talking, I said, what do you think about companies with open roadmaps, companies that have maybe open source some things that aren't necessarily, usable, like as in it's, you need a login and an account and everything, but the code is technically open source. You see kind of these sort of open source like approaches, like an open roadmap or sort of open source hidden behind a customer veil. What do you think about this?
I will be mean. I call that open source washing. And that's all. It's only open source for marketing purpose, not for the real purpose of open source. So,
are you saying marketing purposes are not noble purposes?
If you want to sell whatever your customer needs are, you're evil.
I'll take that.
Okay, no, I kind of agree. I would say that it's the fundamental difference is that when you are an open source company, anybody can take your source code, build another product, be your competitor. And that is very good for the users because it means if they're able to take your code, make a better product out of it, then it's even better for your users. And to be honest, it keeps you awake. It keeps you on your toes, It's at any moment, anybody can take our code and make a better product that we do. So we need to continue involving, innovating, progressing, having a good community, and so on. So that's a very important part.
Yeah, it seems like putting your product out there for free really forces you to answer the question, why should I give you money? right? Okay, so in Postgres, it's not your
simply
your
don't.
product, but for enterprise DB, people do, right?
Yes.
And so but it really makes it clear, like, our value is not Postgres.
Our value is the knowledge of Postgres, because we are talking about something very complex as a relational database engine with a lot of complexity inside, and so knowledge about how it works is valuable.
Yeah, on my side, the funny thing, to be honest, our biggest competitor, it's our open source edition. So, and in a way, if we are losing against our own software, we are winning it. Because at the end, if the user is growing with the software, at some point he may need the enterprise edition, and then we won.
Okay, well, thanks guys for coming out. I really appreciate the time talking. Thanks for sharing a little bit of insight into how building on top of open source works. Let's give them a huge round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.